Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So on today's video, we're gonna be working on the Honda Accord here. My brother's Accord, this is a 2013 with a 4-cylinder engine. He ended up busting a hole in his oil pan. So on today's video, we're gonna be taking the oil pan off and swapping it with a new one. So stay tuned. So the oil pan on this car is not as easy to take off as some of the other cars. There is a bunch of complicated stuff you have to do, as well as actually lowering the subframe a little bit or raising the engine to get to clear the pickup line. There are instructions that you can find online. We printed up some right here. They're factory instructions. If you guys need these, I'll link them down in the description on how to take apart. I think the only thing that we're not doing in here is unbolting the steering column that it says. I don't think that's needed. Other than that, you have to do the AC compressor, and then some of the engine mounts you have to undo. All the bolts that hold it on and into the transmission you have to take apart. These are all subframe stuff that you have to unbolt to get it clearance. And then once you take it off, there's a bunch of 10 millimeters all around there, and I think there's one long bolt right here you have to do. So once we get underneath, we'll see where everything's at. But yeah, if you need these same instructions, go ahead and check the link out. So underneath the car, so you can see that big ass hole right there that he hit a piece of debris on the highway and then immediately exited within a couple minutes and realized all the oil was gone, so he had it towed home. But that's a big old hole right there you can see in the aluminum oil pan. Hopefully we didn't do any major damage by running it for a couple minutes after this thing lost all its oil. So the first thing you really need to do on here is unbolt the AC compressor. There's 4 bolts. There's one right here, there's one on the over here somewhere. These are really hard to get to up top. A regular gear wrench or something should be able to unbolt those things. And then underneath there's 2 more. Once you take that off, you also have to loosen your belt. So your accessory belt over here, you have to take that off, and you want to swing this thing out of the way. You don't want to unbolt any of the gas or anything, leave that all intact. You just want to move this thing out of the way so you could drop the actual oil pan and get to all the bolts. The next thing you do after you loosen your AC compressor is you want to drop your downpipe for your exhaust. That thing crosses over the oil pan, so we're going to go ahead and unbolt that thing and just take the whole thing down or off the car, so that way it's not in the way. So that thing's bolted right here on top by these bolts right here. These things are going to be pretty tight. You might have to impact these off, and then underneath, when it connects to the back of the exhaust, you have to unbolt there. To impact off some of the stuff, we're going to be using this Vivor right here, this kit. I got this kit from Vivor. They sent it over to me to try out, but if you guys want the same stuff, go ahead and check out the links down in the description. These things are pretty affordable. This thing comes with a bunch of stuff that's useful for working on Toyotas and Hondas and a lot of import vehicles, as well as domestic, because this thing has both metric and standard. So once you get inside, so you got all these deep socket right here impact drives. These are all 3/8 inch that use your standard socket or your impact driver. One of the things I liked about it, it came with a bunch of Torx bits right here that are very useful for working on a lot of different cars, as well as e-Torx, which we use on Toyotas all the time to take studs off. Along with the deep sockets, we have just regular sockets here. Here's all the metric stuff. Here's all the standard, and then you got the big metric all the way up to 19, so that's very useful. And then it also comes with these. These are more your swivel sockets, so for hard to reach places, you could put an extension or your impact on here and get kind of the swivel into hard to reach locations. So we started taking apart some of the exhaust nuts right here off the header. There's a hard to reach one that we're using that Vivor swivel socket on right now. Yeah, we already used the deep socket with the long extension that comes with that kit, and went ahead and got all the nuts off. So this thing is pretty good up here. So we have to get the back one right there that's by the resonator. So that top one was a little bit tight, so we got to put a breaker bar on it just to break it loose before we, oh, there we go. Also on that mid pipe or that down pipe, there's a O2 sensor you gotta be careful with that you don't break or mess up. You have to unbolt that thing and get it out too. Yeah, so once we did that, we went ahead and gonna go ahead and shoot it off once you break it off so you can get it. Before we go any further and take everything off, we want to just unplug the O2 sensor and get it out of the way. So on the downpipe right here, there's a couple bolts and studs, but it's easier probably just to unbolt it off the block instead of off the bracket, because you got to slide it to get it out of the way. So you got to still take it off the block so it can drop straight down. Once you unbolt everything, you gotta remember the rubber hanger that's right there too. You gotta pop that thing out. Usually I take a screwdriver and just slide it out, or WD-40 to grease it and then slide it out. So for that rubber gasket or the rubber hanger, it's actually easier just to unbolt from the bracket right there. The bracket's bolted to the aluminum subframe, so we're just gonna go ahead and just take it off from there. So we got everything loose, and just kind of wiggle it out from the top here and take the whole pipe down. So over here, that's the bracket right here that holds the mount on, so that it's easier just to take the bracket off. This one's a little bit hard to get to, so you need a swivel or a wrench to get to that. Back here, this is that bracket that goes to the block, so it's easier just to do the block, leave the nuts on this side. So the next thing they want us to do is go ahead and loosen this top mount for the engine mount here. So you got these two bolts right here, and then go ahead and undo the vacuum line here. So that way we could just take that whole bracket out from here and give the engine some vertical movement upwards. So instead of taking out the vacuum line, we're just popping it off of the clip and kind of just leaving it here, because I don't think you need to unplug the vacuum line like this. So next we want to do the 217s right here to take the top bracket off. And then the cross bolt right there is a 14 that we want to undo. Once you take those two nuts off, the bracket just comes loose. And then unbolt the 14 for the engine mount into the actual mount. So that bolt right here is that bolt, and it came out pretty easy. You probably need to get a gear wrench once it gets over here, because you start losing space because of the radiator. So next on the list, they want to remove the lower cover. We already did the exhaust, and then the clutch cover and everything on that side is where we're going to remove all the clutch cover and the bolts onto that side. So that lower transmission mount there. So you do the two bolts that go into the transmission, not the cross bolt. They warn you about the cross bolt because that, I think, is a set spot due to the flex of it, and they say something about replacing it as an assembly, so that's not supposed to come apart. So we've been working with this panel under here on, but the thing is we need to take it apart just to access the subframe. That's that transmission mount right there that they want you to unbolt from the side. So that's sitting on the subframe right there, and then on this side, these are all the subframe spots right here that we want to unbolt once we take the plastic cover off over here. And then after that, they want you to support the transmission with a jack, and then take the mount off the transmission right there from the engine, which is why they want you to support this thing under a jack. So we went ahead and got the inspection cover off, the 317s that go into the transmission, and then the one really long 10mm right there. Next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing the transmission mount right there. The side two bolts that go into the transmission, you could do it from the wheel well, just turn the wheel and then do it from the side. What you want to do is lift up the transmission and support it like it says in the instructions while you're taking that bolt out. Jacked up right there. Onto the side over here, we have room once we turn the wheel to get to those two bolts. Unbolted and loosen it up. We took the two bolts out right there, lowered the transmission, so we're going to go to the other side and do the mount on that side while we support the subframe according to the instructions. So they want us to loosen the two bolts on the driver's side right there. Mount is kind of hard to get to. It's under the tire or behind the tire. You just reach in there, just loosen them. I don't think you take them off. So we got to do this on both sides to loosen that bolt for the subframe so it can slide down. So we'll go ahead on both sides. The other side we were doing was the driver, now we're on the passenger side. All right, right here we went ahead and loosened both sides, and we want to drop it about 10 millimeters. We don't want to take all the bolts out on either side, so you want to do both sides so that way it lowers it to give you some clearance. And then on the front side, they want us to go ahead and remove this bracket right here, this entire bracket, along with this bolt right here on both sides. This is a subframe bolt up to the frame. They want to remove completely so the front can come down a little bit while the back still stays on. So you got to be really careful with this. Make sure you leave your jack in place for safety. So before we lower the subframe, I'm gonna just go ahead and actually just loosen all the bolts or take them out, the 10 millimeters, because this thing's not going anywhere as far as the oil pan because it's stuck on with the gasket. So we're going to do this first before we lower the subframe, because the subframe lowering is really just to get the clearance so we can pull that thing out past the oil pickup line. All right, so we're just slowly taking apart these 10 millimeters. The one over here near the AC compressor, it's a little bit tight, so you need one of the little baby 10 millimeters to reach it with some extensions. You gotta take apart the oil filter and everything down here to get to it, and then just unbolt everything. So there's the OEM aluminum oil pan right here. You can see it comes with the gasket right here, so you don't have to worry about buying that separately. You got a dowel pin right there, a dowel pin right here. To put this on, you have to put the Honda Bond all the way around on the inside of all the bolt holes, and then you have between 4 and 5 minutes once you lay this bead down to get it back into the car and bolt it up before it starts getting tacky. The one thing you want to do is do a dry fit of this before you even put anything on, so that way you know your time and what the effort is to get it in there. It also comes with a new bolt with a washer for the drain bolt, so you're good there. You don't have to reuse your original one. And then it looks like for all the newer Hondas, the actual oil filter is part of the pan. So if you ever strip this thing out, you might have to replace the whole pan unless you get this piece separately inside here. All right, we got everything unbolted on the bottom and try to lower as much as we can. So the next thing we gotta do is take the AC belt off so we can move the compressor off to the side a little bit to make some clearance up here. So over here, what you want to do is there's this release bolt right here, is a 17. Put a wrench on there and pull it forward to release the belt, the tensioner for the belt, and just slide it off to the side. That will release the tension, and then we could pull the AC compressor forward and kind of just let it sit on top of the subframe right there. Went ahead, tied this thing up using a bungee cord just to hold the compressor up while we're working underneath so it doesn't rattle everywhere. The belt's still just hanging out over here. Once we're done, we can rehook that back up. We went ahead and took the bolt off for the front subframe on both sides. I released the jack down, but it doesn't go the 3, almost 4 inches that they say in the book. So I'm not sure what's really holding it up right now, because we did unbolt the back ones right there. You can kind of see a gap. All right. Make sure you get all the bolts. You can see them on the new pan right here. Make sure they're all out. So each one of the corners on here has a pry spot right there. Over here, the pry spot's right by this little dowel pin hole right here. And then this back side has got this little ear on the transmission, I think. That is a little bit. So the side of here, you could go into this area and you could see the corner right there. You get a big screwdriver or a pry bar, pry in that spot, pry in this corner, and then under at the transmission side you can go ahead and pry. But I figure once you get this side, it should break the seal and the other side should be easy. Took the wheel off just to get us more room, but I was able to get a screwdriver right in that spot right here and just tap it in and break the seal. So we've broken the seal, so the rest of it should be pretty easy all the way around to get this thing off. All right, we got it broken loose. Now we're just kind of wiggling it out, try to get everything out of the way. All right. Try to drop it straight down. I think you gotta lift it. I think you gotta drop this side, drop the driver's side down first, or the passenger side, and then no, drive it on this side by the pulley, my side. Drop this side down and then try to angle it, right? Because I can see the pickup right here. Okay, so right now we can see where we're tight So there's a bunch of pickup and stuff in here. So we gotta get this thing down the 4 inches that we need to clear that. So what I did was I put a bar right here to try to push the subframe down, and then we're trying to get it to 4 inches, and then try to, okay, wiggle it out now, Con. Angle it out, or because I can see it over here. Wedge this thing, get it at 3 inches that you need for clearance on this side. All right, we were able to lower this thing. That's like more than 4 inches on this side. I ended up lowering this side more and putting a jack stand for safety here. And we're gonna go try this again. Lift that side, and then bring this side down first. Because we want to get past the lip of the subframe right here. All right, I can see the. All right, I'm gonna lift. Okay. Oh, fuck. So right now we're stuck right here on this gear, so I need 2 hands. All right, finally got the thing out. What we did is look at the big old gap that we had to create right here. It's more than a 4 or 5 inch gap right now on this spot, but what was holding us back was we forgot that we had the jack supporting the front side, so we didn't get it down enough. Once we lowered the jack, we were able to clear this spot and get the oil pan out, but trying to get it back in within the 5 minutes, it's gonna be a big pain in the ass. We're gonna have to try to dry fit this thing a couple times just to make sure that we get a good handle on getting it in and out before we put the Honda Bond on and doing it for real. All right, so here's what it looks like underneath. Yeah, we should have pulled up the dipstick before we did this, but you can see the Honda Bond is still a layer of it in there. We have to get a razor blade and just scrape all this thing clean. I'm going to use probably some acetone to make sure that we clean all the mating surfaces on this side so that we get a nice good bond once we put the pan back in. Like I said earlier, we're going to have to dry fit this thing a few times just to get the hang of it, so that way we can pull it back up, get the bolts in really fast, and then at least so that way we get it in there before the Honda Bond sets and gets too tacky. So our struggle was that we had this thing up too high and we forgot about it on this side. Once I lowered this thing down far enough, I was able to get the subframe on this side down far enough to clear that thing. But yeah, this is a big pain in the ass. No other videos on YouTube about this. This is probably the first video doing this, so hopefully you guys that are using this, it's going to be helpful for you for doing this. Remember to give me a thumbs up on showing you guys exactly what needs to be done to do this job. We went ahead and cleaned everything with some acetone, all the surfaces. Make sure that you get, especially along the long runs between the bolts, you want to make sure that's nice and clean, so that way it gives a good seal. On the areas around the bolts where we still have a little bit left in there, that's not a big deal because all those bolt areas are going to be pretty tight as far as the seal goes, because we have that bolt there, but in between is where we want to make sure that it seals well. So we're going to go ahead and do a dry run with the oil pan just to make sure that we get it back in here quick enough once we put the Honda Bond on, and then after that we'll do it for real. All right, so for the dry run, we went ahead and just let this subframe hang as far as possible, so it's actually like 5 or 6 inches down, and it looks like we have plenty of a clearance right now. So we'll go ahead and test fit it to see if it slips in and slips out easily. If it does, then we go ahead and do the bonding. So we've done this a few times already. So what it helps is if you have a hand on this side to guide it. Once we get it past that pickup right there, it goes up really easily, and then line up the dowel pins. Have the person on this side put the bolt over here in this corner, and then put the bolt on the other corner, but you want to make sure you snap the dowel pin in. Right now it doesn't look like it's snapped in, so wiggle it around. Yeah, so once you wiggle around and you get that in, put that bolt here, the other person puts the other bolt, and then you go ahead and just start tightening them down in the order that they show on the instructions, and then torque it to the 9 or 10 foot-pounds. We're gonna go ahead and just clean the new pan right here with acetone all around the edge, so we have a nice clean surface like the other side that we just got finished. And then we're gonna lay down the Honda Bond. So we're using Honda Bond HT right here. This is the recommended Honda Bond for this. I think there's a few other models that they use. There's another one that's not Honda Bond, it's a different oil pan one that dries a lot quicker, but this one I think you're still supposed to do this under 5 minutes and put it up there and let it cure for a couple days before you actually drive the vehicle. So definitely is not the ones they used in the shop. If they were using in the shop, they would have one that dries within a couple hours so they get the car out of there. So for the Honda bond, you want to make sure you cut this thing. I like to cut mine at an angle. That way when we apply it, we just go at an angle along the whole line. But what you want to do along here is you want to go wherever the bolts are, go on the inside of the bolt, because you want to create the seal on the inside of the pan all the way around. But down the middle, you just want to go in the middle of these sections right here. Before we get started with this, you want to make sure you have a timer ready so you can get set the 5-minute timer. And then you want over here, you want to make sure you have all your tools, your bolts and everything ready once we get down there and bolt it up. So just make sure that's all ready, and that way we can do this. All right, puncture the tube. Once we start laying it down, we'll get it ready. Go. Yep. Then we'll get the timer ready. Squeeze, roll the back. So you want to roll the back out and then just kind of press it through the tube. Yeah, this thing comes out of the tube pretty slowly, but we just gotta keep working. That thing was going a little slow, so we try to cut it further down to get a bigger mouth to see if it comes out a little faster. All right, we got a nice even bead around as much as we could, so we'll go ahead and get us on the car as quick as we can. We didn't record the lift because we needed 2 hands to guide it in to make sure, but we got it basically in just the same way we dry fitted it. Once we got it up, I went ahead and put these 2 corners, and then my brother put the other 2 corners, and we just wanted to hand tighten those, not fully tighten yet, because we wanted to slowly tighten it to get a nice squeeze evenly around. So once you get the 4 corners kind of snug, start getting the middle ones, and then slowly just tighten them in the order that it shows, and that way we get a nice even squeeze on this. As you slowly tighten it, you can see the nice squeeze of the Honda bond coming out of the edges. You just want to leave that alone. That's going to basically provide you a nice even seal around the edges. All right, went ahead and tightened everything back up. Got everything basically tightened to 10 or 9 foot-pounds, which is basically hand tight. You can kind of see the squeeze of all the Honda bond on the edges. We ended up putting everything back here for the transmission back on, including those 317s, the inspection plate cover, and then over here, so we'll go ahead next is basically the reverse of the removal. Gotta get the AC compressor back in, get the exhaust and all that back in, lift the subframe and all this back up, and bolt this all down and torque it together. But after this, we're gonna definitely need to do a pressure wash under here of all the oil and residue from this busted pan all along the passenger side of this car. So go ahead and get the AC compressor in. We want to make sure you put the 2 longer bolts up top and the 2 shorter ones go to the bottom, but you hand tighten it in, make sure it gets good thread and you don't cross thread, and just tighten it all back down. Got the belt back in. Just remember your order that you had to get this belt back in, because we had to figure out what it was. If you don't know, check out a previous video when I was doing this alternator. We actually showed you exactly how to do that belt, but right now we got it back in correctly after some trial and error. So this kit came in pretty clutch doing this project today. So we pretty much use all the common 17, 14, 10 millimeter along with the swivel ones for this project. These things are pretty nice as far as getting into tight spaces with these swivels. They're a little bit big right here as far as that goes, but if you could get it in there, you could pretty much swivel it, pretty much get it any place you need to make it work for your project. So over here we had some other adapters that came in pretty useful too. The long extensions, we used those on this project today by trying to reach some long bolts. If you need a 1/2 inch to 3/8, it comes with that adapter there. It comes with an impact driver adapter. It comes with a short extension. And then if you would just want to use the regular sockets, like the short ones or the long ones, but still swivel, there's actually a 3/8 to 3/8 swivel right here, along with all the impact sockets and the swivels, the e-torques, the regular torques over here, and then just all these sockets. This kit is very useful. If you guys need a kit like this, check out the links down in the description to Amazon. This is a very good kit for anyone that's doing kind of major mechanical work on their car and want to have everything at hand. One thing I found very useful is these things come with both the etching, the bright etching that you can see from far away, and it's also stamped into there in case those things ever wear out. So all the sockets have both ways to identify them, so it makes it a lot easier when you're laying under a car or trying to reach something to get the right socket for your job. Alright guys, thanks for joining us all the way to the end of this video. We got pretty much everything back together. So we're gonna let this cure for a couple days just to make sure everything's good on it with the Honda Bond. And once it cures, we're gonna go ahead and fill it with oil and run it to see if make sure it doesn't leak. Anyways, if you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to your channel, go ahead and subscribe to your channel, turn on bell notifications to get notified every time I upload a video. For all these different projects, if I can do it, you can do it. I want to thank you for watching. I'll talk to you guys next time.